Thank you. So welcome. I now call to order tonight's special meeting of the Town Council. Tonight is July 24, 2017. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Thank you. Councilmember Steve Leonardis. Councilmember Marcia Jensen.
Here.
Councilmember Barbara Spector.
Here.
Vice Mayor Rob Rennie.
Here.
Mayor and Chair Mariko Sayak.
Here. So we do have a quorum for all those interested, even though visually you see three of us. We have one on teleconference, and we will proceed. And if Councilmember Leonardis does arrive, we will note his arrival to tonight's meeting. Okay? If you could just join me for tonight's Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, thank you. So tonight, I'll go over a couple of procedural items, but as I mentioned, tonight's a special meeting. We have one agenda item. In a minute, I will be asking the Madam Clerk, our clerk, to submit to me all the cards that have been submitted. You have two opportunities to speak tonight. The first is with anything with regards to North 40. Under verbal communication, you could also speak on any other item. At this time, it does not appear that we have anything under verbal, so we will proceed straight to our North 40 hearing, and those cards will be coming shortly. So tonight will be run similar to many other land use applications. We will begin with a land use report from our town attorney. After that, I will open it up to council members to ask questions of our staff. Staff will be introduced who can be here to answer the technical questions that may arise. After that, we will open the verbal testimony of our public hearing. The applicant will have a cumulative of 10 minutes to speak. Each individual in the audience who would like to speak will be given 3, and then we will conclude with 5 minutes, again from our applicant's team, a cumulative of 5 minutes. If there are specific questions of the speaker, I'll ask the council members to ask those of you. If there are questions that are prompted by the conversation but are better appropriated to our staff, those will be asked after we conclude our verbal testimony. Okay, so I'm going to try and keep us on track. There are a lot of people here. I know you would like to speak, so our goal is to make sure that everyone who would like to speak will be heard. Okay, and if the record could show that Councilmember Leonardis has joined us, 603. And if everyone could just be patient while we wait for him to take his seat. Okay. So just a reminder, I am about to open North 40 Phase 1 Architecture and Site Application S-13-090, Vesting Tentative Map Application M-13-014. So this public hearing is being held pursuant to a court order directing the Town Council to set aside the denial of the North 40 development applications and reconsider the applications under the provisions of Government Code 65589.5, known as the Housing Accountability Act. During the staff report, we will get more information about those provisions, and again, our legal counsel will be here to answer any specific questions of those provisions. I ask that we conduct tonight's hearing as civil and as respectable as possible. We've had many of these hearings, and we are not here to rehear the project details, but really focus on the direction that the court has ordered us to focus on. And so again, Mr. Schultz, if you could remind us what those provisions are, we can get tonight's hearing started.
Yes. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm going to briefly give a PowerPoint presentation and go over a few slides of basically the background on how we got here, a little bit about the project that is proposed, and primarily about the court decision that was rendered by the court in June. So with that, I'll begin with just a little bit of background. So the North 40 Committee was established in March of 2011. They held meetings from March 2011 and until October 2013, and all of those meetings were open to the public. An EIR was prepared and circulated for the North 40 specific plan in 2014 and 2015. 14 and 15, the Planning Commission and the Town Council had meetings to review the EIR and the specific plan. The final EIR was certified and adopted by the Town Council in June 17, 2015. The specific plan allows for 270 residential units and approximately 500,000 square feet of commercial use. The proposed project that you'll be reviewing again consists of 260 residential condominiums, row homes, 10 rental apartments, 49 affordable senior rental units, 1 unit for the manager of that senior units, and approximately 66,000 square feet of commercial area. To allow for the more than the 270 residential units that were allowed under a specific plan, the applicant has asked for a density bonus under the state density bonus law. The town considered this application over the course of 4 public hearings in August and September of 2016, and on September 1st, 2016, the council denied the project. On October 6th, the applicants filed a lawsuit against the town based on the alleged violations of the housing element, the State Housing Accountability Act, and the state density bonus law. In June, the court issued a decision against the town and directed the town to set aside the denial and reconsider the project under the Housing Accountability Act. The court determined that the denial was based on subjective policies in the specific plan instead of under objective findings and policies as required by the Housing Accountability Act. The Housing Accountability Act is often referred to as the anti-NIMBY law. It was enacted because local governments had failed to comply with their own housing policies when denying projects. The Housing Accountability Act requires local governments to approve any housing development project if it complies with the applicable general plan and zoning standards and criteria, including design review standards. And that's directly quoted from the Housing Accountability Act. The court's decision did make determinations in regards to the town's original findings for denial. It did say that the town's findings were based on substantial evidence in the record. However, it did say those findings recited were findings that dealt with subjective criteria instead of objective criteria. The HAA does not define the term objective standard. The following definitions of the term found within the 2 dictionaries are: the Law Dictionary says, for an objective standard is a standard that is based on factual measurements in the absence of a biased judgment or analysis. The Business Dictionary states that benchmark criteria are a model based on variable measurements or bias-free analysis and judgment. I would also point out that SB 35, which is pending before the legislation right now and appears that it will be approved, defines objective standards as means a standard that involves no personal or subjective judgment by a public official. That's not the law right now, but it is pending in front of the legislation. Each and every year, the HAA is further tightened, it seems, in the last 3 years to tighten up control and take away local control when it deals with housing development projects. So from a staff standpoint, objective standards are typically qualifiable and numerical standards, and that anyone that would evaluate the project against these standards would arrive at the same conclusion. Examples with the North 40 specific plan include height, setbacks, open space requirements. Staff's position has been, since the proposed application went to Planning Commission in March of 2006, is that the actual project does comply with all the objective standards of the North 40 specific plan. The court decision also states that there is substantial evidence in the record to support applicants' contention that the project is consistent with those objective standards. So if the council agrees with staff and council's analysis that the proposed project meets all of the town's objective standards, then the court said it can only deny the project if it determines that the project would have a specific adverse impact upon the public health and safety, and that there is absolutely no feasible measure to satisfactorily mitigate or avoid the adverse impact. That law, both of those quotes, 1 and 2, are directly from the Housing Accountability Act, and it also specifically does define what specific adverse impact is, which is a significant, quantifiable, direct, and unavoidable impact based on objective, identified, written public health and safety standards, policies, or conditions as they existed at the date of application was deemed complete. So in other words, for both of these standards, either if it meets the objective standards or if you do it under the public health and safety, the council is going to have to find exact language in our specific plan or in our other general plan of exact, identifiable, written public health and safety policies that will adversely impact the public and health and safety from this project. The EIR did analyze all the potential adverse impacts from health and safety standpoint, and in that, as I mentioned earlier, that specific plan and EIR was approved and certified by the council, and it adopted the mitigation measures and a statement overriding considerations. From staff standpoint, this means that the impacts have been analyzed in the EIR and that you cannot now use a specific public's health and safety concern for the denial of the applications. As directed by the court, the town council must now rescind its previous denial and reconsider the development applications consistent with the state laws I've just mentioned, and as the court has decided we must follow. It's council's, what we want the council to do is open the public hearing, listen to the verbal comments that are made and the applicant's presentations, and then we do request that you close the public testimony and continue this matter to August 1st to allow for the full council to be here during the deliberation process. And that concludes my presentation.
And Madam Mayor, if I may, for your consideration and the full council, we have with us tonight Director Paulson, who's available to answer questions regarding the specific plan and technical planning and zoning issues, Town Engineer Lisa Peterson for infrastructure, traffic, and other related items, and Economic Vitality Manager Monica Wren, and Interim Chief D'Antonio for any public safety questions, in addition to the town attorney and myself. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, council, I turn to you. As I mentioned, there are opportunities before we begin verbal testimony as well as after. If you have any questions you would like to ask of our staff at this time, feel free. Councilmember Jensen.
This is a process question for the order that we've been given on the slide and which the mayor suggested. I wonder, given that we have a court order to rescind the resolution and then reconsider, is it not appropriate to rescind the resolution first?
That would be your first action after at least the public comment. So you should
Okay.
hear public comment because you might hear from the public comment not to rescind it, so that at least, even though the court is ordering you to do that, you should wait till after the public comment. But that would be your first order after, would be to rescind and then go into whether to make findings to approve the project or to make findings to deny the project.
Okay, thank you.
Council members, any other questions? Vice Mayor Rennie, do you have any before we proceed?
No questions.
Okay. Okay, so at this time, we will begin the public hearing, and I will ask Mr. Faber to come forward. And again, you have 10 minutes cumulatively, and if there are specific questions that will be asked of your team, if you could just make sure that those cards are also submitted.
Okay, very good, thank you. No, I'm happy if just for giving me my time back. If you could do that. Please be good. Thank you. Andrew Faber, representing the applicants Summerhill, Grosvenor, and Eden Housing. As I was saying, we spent a lot of time here a year ago presenting our project to you. You spent a lot of time, the town collectively did, various members of the public as well, and the staff. That's not what we're here for tonight. As council notes, we are here because there's a court order. We're not representing our project. We are, in fact, here to try to give you some guidance from our perspective about how to deal with the court order and what it requires. And if you have specific questions, we can provide perhaps answers to them about the project. The project applicants' representatives are here as before. On the other hand, it may be you'll have questions that you'd like us to answer before April 1st as well. If issues come up tonight, we would certainly want the ability to get something in writing to you if that's appropriate. So what the town needs to do right now, as you know and as you have just been advised, is rescind your prior denials and reconsider under the mandates of these laws that are involved. The housing element law, which we'll talk about in a few minutes on by right, the density bonus law, and of course the Housing Accountability Act, which council has referred to specifically. And essentially, there was a lot of discussion a year ago about objective versus subjective findings. These are not new issues for you, as you know. But the court has focused your attention on what are objective reasons. And if the project is going to be denied, it can only be because of objective standards, as you well know. Why is that important? The reason that objective standards are important is because that's how people know what can be done. Your plan, the specific plan, starts out with a page of general principles and ends up with many pages of objective standards and guidelines and principles. And those have to be followed. And when a property owner or developer thinks, I can build housing, that's what they look to. That's why objective things are important. And the question of what's objective is a very important matter, because that's what certainty and clarity is based on. And the whole point of the state law that we're dealing with, which encourages housing, encourages anti-NIMBYism, is to give clarity and certainty through proper planning. And that's what you did. You did that. You spent years working on a specific plan. There were scores of public meetings of the committee, of the planning commission, of the council, and that specific plan gave clarity, and it gave direction, and it gave certainty. My clients participated fully. It's not surprising that the project they came up with meets fully the requirements of the specific plan because they participated for years. They even financed a specific plan, even though they had no control over it. But they participated, they knew what it said. As Don Capobre said at one of the hearings, if you had wanted single-family homes and the plan had said that, that's what we would have given you. But that's not what the plan says. And what we did give you is a project that complies with the plan. Now, there's some people in town who don't like the plan. We understand that. And there's some people perhaps who didn't really realize what the plan meant, even though it had gone through this exhaustive process. And they want to change the rules in the middle of the game. And that's not appropriate. You made your plan. Now it's time for the implementation phase of the plan. And at the implementation stage, you need to approve a project that is based on the requirements of the plan and meets those requirements. That's the purpose of planning. That's why the state has these laws to require cities to have a plan and then to approve projects that comply with them. That's how housing can get built. Now, I talked about changing the rules in the middle of the game, but I don't want to be frivolous. This is not a game. This is very serious business. Property owners and developers have spent millions of dollars on this project. They've bought land. They have hired architects, engineers. They've done environmental analysis. They spent years on this. They've even hired lawyers. They've done everything right, and they have an enormous investment. So it's not a competition. It's not a strategy issue. It's not properly a game where people say, how can we find something in the record, some pretext, some piece of paper somewhere that would give the town the opportunity to deny the project. This is a very serious business. And because the project has been delayed at least a year, the town isn't getting the benefits. Nothing has been built. The traffic improvements have not been made. The 50 senior affordable units are going to be delayed at least a year. And we're not trying to get anything we're not asking the town to do anything the town hasn't said it wants to do. We're asking the town to approve a project. And the issue isn't whether housing should be built on the North 40, and the issue isn't whether housing should be built at 20 units per acre. That issue has been settled. That's what the plan says. And the reason the plan says that is that the town worked in an exhaustive process, and it complied with state law with its housing element. Housing, as you know, is a regional matter in the state. The Association of Bay Area Governments gives you your numbers, your RHNA numbers. You have to comply with those. Every city does. Cities don't have to build housing, but they have to provide land with suitable zoning for the right density and free of constraints and barriers so that kind of housing can be built. Now, Los Gatos had a serious problem with that a couple of years ago. When the housing element was expiring, there was no way the town could meet its RENA numbers. You may recall you had the AHOZ, AHOZ for a while, and the state said that doesn't work. And what you did, the North 40 solved that problem. The housing element says for the North 40, this is where 20 unit per acre housing, which the state requires you to plan for, can be built. It will be built pursuant to objective criteria. If the proposal meets the objective criteria in the design guidelines, then the project is approved. That's what your plan says. And based on that, the state said, all right, we can certify your housing element because you have promised that in the North 40 area, if a project comes along for the 20 unit per acre density that's required, then you will approve it. There are no constraints to this housing, and that's what the state needed. And as a result, the town got real benefits. You got the ability to continue your development. You got the housing element certified, which means that you're eligible for state grants. Because under recent state law, and the state notified you of this when they certified the housing element, you're not eligible for state grant monies if your housing element isn't certified. So you got real benefits by promising the state that there would be by right development. By the same token, the state can take away those benefits. So this is a serious thing for the town. There can be risks here in terms of sanctioning the town, prohibiting other development, requiring that alternative sites be located by the town. You'll have to go through the same process again, which was very unpleasant when you were originally trying to find sites. So we're trying to avoid all that, and the way to avoid all that is to act responsibly and approve the project. There are certainly opponents of the project that are urging you not to do that. They're looking for every scrap of evidence they can find, every technicality that they can find to say, let's premise a finding on this. But that's not your job. Your job is to act responsibly. They're urging you to act irresponsibly. Your job is to act responsibly, not to look for pretext to deny the project, but rather to acknowledge, as council has said, that the project meets everything you asked it to do. It meets your objective standards. It's a really nice project. In addition, it has many benefits, as you know. The HCD letter to you that's in the record from about a year ago says that by right decision-making must follow development standards that are objective, fixed, predictable, clear, quantifiable, written. It goes on. There are a lot of adjectives, but you get the point. That's what HCD says you must do. The Housing Accountability Act also has a standard in it. It says development standards, conditions, and policies shall be applied to facilitate and accommodate development at the density permitted on the site and proposed by the development. That's really what responsible leadership means at this point, particularly when you're under a court order based on the activities a year ago. So we would like to work with you. We would like to have you approve this project. We'd like to go back to court together and tell the court the town has, in fact, done what you said. They've rescinded the denials. They have approved the project. And I think that that's the appropriate approach for the town at this time. So that concludes my presentation. As I said, if you have questions on the project, we perhaps can answer them. Or if you have questions that you want us to answer and respond to in writing, we'd be happy to do that as well.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Faber. As you know, with our process, you will have 5 minutes afterwards. So at that time, depending on the various comments that are heard, you may decide to use your 5 minutes, or as we've said, this meeting, you can't submit more written testimony until deliberations, which will happen on August 1st, not April 1st, I think is what you said initially.
April 1st? Oh, gosh. Thank you very much.
Okay. Okay, Nicole, is it Montajo? Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the Town Council. My name is Nicole Montojo, and I am here on behalf of Silicon Valley at Home, as well as the 9 organizations who signed on to the letter that we sent earlier this afternoon. We strongly urge the Town Council to reconsider the North 40 development application. The housing that this project will provide is essential in light of Los Gatos' extreme housing crisis. Data show that 93% of the town's workforce live outside the community, and more than 11 low-wage workers compete for each affordable home in Los Gatos. Even moderate-income workers struggle to afford the median rent of nearly $5,000 per month, while low-income families, seniors on fixed incomes, and many others face an even greater struggle to make ends meet. Addressing this crisis begins with approving the North 40 Phase 1 project. We need you to take action to alleviate the existing lack of housing and urge you to approve the project without further delay. It is a matter of equity and creating a better quality of life for all of those who live and work in Los Gatos. Thank you for the opportunity to provide our feedback.
Thank you. Michael Lane.
Mayor Sayak and members, council members, Michael Lane with the Nonprofit Housing Association, Northern California. First, just want to express our appreciation for all your work on this over many years and the due diligence that you've done. The staff report is excellent in terms of lining out both the facts and the law as it stands, and so we commend you for that presentation as well. Tremendous work has been done on this North 40 specific plan over the past few years, and the applicant is addressing all of the concerns, meeting the standards, and addressing impacts both in terms of schools, traffic, transportation issues, and committing to investments, impact fees, et cetera, to maintain and to respect and reflect the beautiful character of this town, and I've seen their commitment to that. Seniors have no impact on schools and a lower rate of car ownership, and we know our lower income seniors really need this housing. Very low income housing, there's been virtually none of it produced in the town over the past 15 years. Here's an opportunity to have 49 very low income homes for seniors as part of this larger project, and we think that's very important. We urge you to follow the court order and to follow state law, including density bonus, housing element law, and the Housing Accountability Act, as you've committed to do when your housing element was certified by HCD. And we also urge you to adopt the staff recommendations to set aside the denial and then to set that hearing for August 1st, and we appreciate your consideration. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ann Fisher. I'm sorry, excuse me. Ann Fisher with Silicon Valley Bicycle Coalition.
Good evening. I'm here, I am on the staff of the Silicon Valley Bicycle Coalition, which is a membership-based nonprofit organization, works to encourage bicycling for all purposes, for all people. I'm also a resident of Los Gatos. I'm here to support the North 40 development proposal. The development plan would make significant improvements to traffic circulation and bicycle infrastructure. We're very pleased with the bike elements that the developers incorporated. The developers have worked for a long time to put a plan in place that meets the needs and requirements articulated by the town, and yet the town has rejected it. We, and the court did not agree with that, that there was grounds to deny the approval. So we feel it's time for the town to approve the project and really stop wasting any further time or money on the delay. So I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you. Stacy Hatfield.
Hi. I'm for the project. And I just feel like the builders have gone above and beyond to do so many things for our community, like the bike lanes and school funding and traffic. And I really think the garden project is fantastic. And the senior housing. My mother right now is 70 years old and she's homeless. So she lives between the siblings' houses, and I mean, for her to have a place to live would be amazing. And I just feel like I feel like it's the town's duty to help with this housing crisis that we have in this valley. And I have a hard time understanding why we're not leaders and we're not doing everything that we can to create housing. We're not immune to this problem because we live in this great community. We can't just shut our eyes and ignore it. I mean, most of the people that I work with travel 2 and 3 hours to get to work. I mean, that's not fair. If we have the ability to create housing, let's do it. Let's just do it. I mean, I want to be proud of our community. I want to be proud to say that I live here. Right now, I'm not. And but I think, we have a lot of great people here, and I think we could be open and we could get this passed. But I think that I just wish that we would be leaders in this process and not keep denying it. I mean, how much money are we going to spend where we could be using that money for more positive projects instead of saying no, let's say yes. Also, Netflix is like 4 stories tall. They didn't do anything with the bike lane. I always travel in that area. It's kind of dangerous if you were going on Winchester and getting onto the Netflix campus. So I'm just wondering, why is so many requirements are being made for this builder, but they were not being made for the Netflix? And it just feels like it's housing, so.
Thank you. And so for those who are speaking for the first time in our chambers, just a reminder, you have 3 minutes. The yellow light signifies that you have 30 seconds remaining, and then the red light will indicate your time is up. And I know I've said it before, but if we could be somewhat respectful, I hear a lot of whispering, and so it's kind of difficult to listen to the speaker. So if you do have conversations that you need to have, please take them out in the lobby, and we'll make sure that when your card is called, that you'll be able to come forward and speak. Next speaker is Angelia Dorner. And after Ms. Dorner will be Jeff Lockridge.
Okay. Hello, Angelia Dorner, proud resident of the Almond Grove. This town faces one overriding issue in that we have no control over rerouting of regional cut-through traffic due to the inability of state and county highways to accommodate now routine regional traffic from 85, 17, and 9 all the way to the final choke point at Santa Cruz and the off-ramp. Now we are here looking at the North 40, which is at one of the most critical junctures of all of this cut-through traffic. The only reason why these lines of the streets are green is because I printed this map at 3 o'clock in the morning. Otherwise, everything on the chart would be red. We also have 30,000 square feet of office space coming in at Winchester and Shelbourne, which is coming up for appeal to you in 3 weeks. 85,000 of office space on Alberta Way and Highway 9 coming up for you on appeal September 19th. Waiting in the wings, we have 22,000 square feet of office space and another 32,000 all down at Highway 9 and 17. Our general plan, I'm sorry. The overriding goal of our general plan transportation element is that we must develop transportation systems that meet current and future needs of residents and businesses, starting with policy TRA 1.1, development shall not exceed transportation capacity. Does anyone here believe we are not at or over capacity several times every day and sometimes every weekend? There are other policies which relate to this as well. The town's current situation can best be described in a letter that follows. For a number of years now, the town has been engaged in efforts to mitigate the impacts from mapping applications that direct traffic from freeways and highways onto local streets. This traffic is now directly impacting commerce at local businesses and most recently has morphed onto residential streets. They were never designed for this kind of gridlock traffic. The impact is real, with residents blocking their driveways, unable to come and go, and a growing fear that public safety may be compromised, including extended response times for the police and fire services. This letter is written by Matt Morley, our very own PPW director, to Google Maps and Waze. As you know, I read the California Housing Accountability Act all the time, but late last night, in one last pass, I looked at paragraph E, which referred to Chapter 2.6, which I'd like to share with you. One of the things that jumped out at me the most was paragraph H in this particular thing, which says that the removal of regulatory barriers to promote infill housing does not preclude a city finding that an individual infill project would be adversely impacted by the surrounding environment or transportation patterns.
Thank you, Ms. Dorner. So do we have a copy of this presentation?
I will be getting it to you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Jeff Lockridge. And after Mr. Lockridge will be Arya Barirani.
Hi, my name is Jeff Lockridge, 109 Paseo Laura. The North 40 continues to be a complicated and controversial project. I feel bad that the town hasn't been able to come to any consensus on this. The North 40 will meet many unmet needs for the town, but even when those needs are met, not everyone agrees that that's enough. And now the courts have determined that decisions moving forward need to be objective rather than subjective. Our general plan, which has been constantly refined as long as it's been in existence, is the primary tool that shapes how development in Los Gatos can occur. The specific plan should be and is a direct extension of that same general plan, but it's not perfect and never will be. And this specific plan is even stricter than ever. This application puts pure residential in the Lark district, mixes residential and commercial in the transition district, and almost exclusively commercial in the northern district. The specific plan says lower density, not low density, and residential is considered a lower intensity use than commercial. This distribution of uses within the plan area, from the lower intensity uses in the south to the most intensive uses in the north, is consistent with the specific plan. The specific plan calls for new open space standards for the North 40. Based on Phase 1's 20.7 acres, a minimum of 30% of the total area of North 40 must be open space. This is equal to 7.25 acres. A minimum of 20% of the total area of the North 40 must be green open space. That's over 4 acres. What is proposed includes affordable housing at the lowest level of affordability, something that has not been built in Los Gatos. Since we, as a town, do not build housing, we are not allowed to mandate exactly how the affordability levels will be distributed. There is a very misunderstood chart categorizing what the town's affordable housing plan is. You just have to remember, though, that the chart was just a plan, not a requirement, and not something that we will be penalized for at the state level because it was just a plan. If that were the case, we'd probably been penalized for the last couple of housing elements for just making plans. So most of the complaints about the North 40 developer's application have been very subjective. I would hope at this point we could at least identify what is and what isn't objective versus subjective. And I urge you to move forward and approve this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Arya Barirani. Afterwards will be Sam Weedman.
Okay, thank you, council members. Some of my commentary has been covered, so I'll try to make this brief. My name is Arya Barirani. I live on Stony Brook Road, 9-year resident of Los Gatos and community member. Like all the residents, we love this town, and we want to preserve the character. For your consideration regarding objective criteria, we have to look at how the world has changed since 2015. I don't think anybody could have predicted on the specific plan the impact of technology and mapping technology, specifically in navigation, in how traffic patterns are changing in Los Gatos, especially impacted on weekends and beach holidays. You guys already know this, and so there's not a lot to cover here, other than the fact that there's material impact to this town, and not a single unit of housing has still been built. We haven't struck ground yet, and we're already impacted, and we're having terrible time on the weekends. We see the police cars, we see the traffic backed up. As you know, these technologies are designed to route people to surface streets when main roads are covered. And I don't believe that there's any hope or any real remedy through these corporations for us to be able to, as a town or municipality, get them to remedy the situation. These are public streets, and these are well-funded, large, multinational corporations. They take on the EU on antitrust. I believe that they can take on Los Gatos if we raise the issue. So I don't think that there's an easy remedy here. So as we look forward, I believe that responsible leadership has to be around looking at the facts as they are and how the facts and the reality of our town has evolved over the last few years, and make responsible decisions based on that. Just throwing more housing at this situation is not going to solve this problem. We're already kind of screwed anyway. So I think that for your consideration, I think there's objective criteria that can be measured. We can take a look very easily at the impact of these new technologies, and to ignore them, I think, would be folly. Thank you.
Thank you. Sam Weedman. And the next speaker is Vasquez Rosaline. Or is that Rosaline Vasquez? So.
Sam Weidman, Car Lester Drive. That's fine. I live about a block and a half away from the intersection of Lark and Los Gatos Boulevard. What I want to do is try to hit on a couple of safety and health aspects I see at that intersection. I did go to the EIR, and I'm going to kind of skip through it really quickly. The EIR obviously covers all of the peak hours of travel. Unfortunately, for the Los Gatos Boulevard, Lark Avenue, it was done back in October of 2012. We know there's been a lot of activity since then. Oops, wrong way. What? I'm trying to go forward. Okay. The mitigation basically went through 2 different iterations, basically difference in amount of square footage for retail, et cetera. As a result of it, the Los Gatos Boulevard and Lark Avenue level of service went from D+ in the morning to D, which is down. In the evening, it went from C- to D also as a result of the project of the North 40. I happen to be out in front of Office Depot. This is traffic heading north on Los Gatos Boulevard. I've circled 2 cars so you can kind of track them as they go down the road. This is all the way back to Office Depot from Burton Road, which is part of the traveling along the project. This one here, the tail lights are all on all the cars because they're all starting to stop already. This one, their brake lights are off, they're moving forward, and you see a little bit more space. That red dot was where I took the next picture, was just north of Camino del Sol, and it shows, again, traffic backed up bumper to bumper. Now, if you notice, this is on a Tuesday at 10:46 in the morning. This is not peak hour by any means. Traffic gets like this quite often on Los Gatos Boulevard just on its own. As a result of the units going into the project, there's going to be an additional 429 vehicles just in covered parking areas belonging to all the residences, which will be added to this. The mitigation things are going to be done for the Los Gatos Boulevard, which is horizontal, Lark Avenue coming down from the top. They're going to make 2 left turns into 3 left turns. Problem I see with this is as soon as you make your left turn onto Los Gatos Boulevard in that green circle, you've got 3 lanes going right into 2 lanes. So somebody's going to have to move. And chances are it's going to be the people in the left turn lane, because that green line there is a raised median that obviously you can't go over unless you want to ruin your car and tires. Okay, so 3 lanes into 2 is going to create problems and backup, especially if the traffic's already backed up from Burton. That raised median goes all the way down to the new signal light, which is going to be at Neighborhood Street. There's going to be 2 left turns, one from north, one from the south. Also, you can do a U-turn at those lights intersections. There's going to be essentially on the east side of the street, there's going to be a bus stop for what I assume the seniors would have to take, because they only have half a parking spot, so they're not going to have probably a vehicle to go anywhere. They're going to be standing on a raised surface, but if a car makes essentially a U-turn at that intersection, if they lose control, they could essentially run over the people standing there waiting to catch the bus. There's another bus stop south of that same street with multi-use paths, and multi-use paths, I understand, are for bicycles, people, skateboards, et cetera. And with elderly people trying to get to the bus stop, I'm concerned about their safety and health when basically you got all kinds of, if you want, foot traffic, bicycle traffic, using the same path they are. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weidman. Dr. Rosaline Vasquez. And afterwards, Jeffrey Aristide.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. Dr. Rosalind Vasquez, and live on Shannon Heights. I've lived in this area pretty much all of my life and have lived in Los Gatos for 23 years. I'd like to comment in opposition to the current North 40 project. I oppose not just due to concerns about its negative impact to Los Gatos, but the negative impact to the entire South Bay and coastal counties. I'd like to also emphasize that many of us, if not most of us, who oppose this project certainly support senior housing, support low-income housing, but are primarily opposed to the location and the specific impacts that this location will have. As Judge Takeachi noted, the town had to have objective reasons to deny the project. The facts are that Los Gatos is a main gateway linking Silicon Valley to the coastal counties. Many residents of the area commute and depend on a viable way to travel through the area. We know and can document that Los Gatos is experiencing a traffic crisis, as has been noted before, which has certainly worsened drastically in the last 2 years. Not only are the town streets often completely blocked, but the freeways come to a bottleneck right at the area of the North 40 project. The public safety and public health issues continue to be real and to worsen. The worsened traffic creates objective harmful effects. As we know, traffic causes many objective effects such as worsened air pollution, worsened air quality, which is known to cause many health effects, including worsened asthma, causing increased hospitalizations and even death. Quality of life can also be quantified and is dependent on many factors, including health, emotional well-being, and ability to carry out a productive life. The 270 units and 66,000 commercial space clearly create many objective problems. Excess demands on electrical, sewer, roads, schools cause many negative objective effects. I and many of my senior patients and neighbors completely support the effort to have increased housing and, as I said, low-cost housing. However, current seniors and current residents need to have access to grocery stores, medical care, gas stations, restaurants, and this location will block their current access. I and others encourage the town to deny the current plan in its current location, but find another location perhaps two locations that are not so impactful. We and others would support funding any efforts to increase the objective documentation to document the impact. Thank you very much.
Jeffrey Aristide, and afterwards Kevin Zawick.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, staff. My name is Jeffrey Aristide. I'm at 102 Noble Court. I just have a couple of brief things. I appreciate all your effort. I think that we should have a development there. There are two issues I have. I think the project should be at least somewhat reworked so it's less dense. And then I'd also like to see a impact study, but I want it commissioned by the town, not by the developer, to find out, the current involvement. I think that the past impact studies have been very, very weak. Some have even claimed there'll be no impact, which everyone in this room knows won't be the case. Thank you.
Thank you. Kevin Zawick, am I pronouncing that correctly? Yeah. Okay.
Hi, I'm Kevin Zwick. I'm the CEO of Housing Trust Silicon Valley. We're a nonprofit affordable housing loan fund that's worked with the town of Los Gatos for a number of years on shared affordable housing goals. For a number of years, the Housing Trust has been supportive of the town of Los Gatos as they've gone through their process to find how the town is going to meet its affordable housing and its overall housing production goals. And I remember many years ago being in meetings with people finding sites and finding where's the right place to put density in the town, because every city has to find locations in its city for where their regional housing needs assessment housing is going to go. And this site and this project has been on the books for a really long time. I mean, first, the Housing Trust just greatly supports this specific development. We think it's a great mix of a variety of different types of housing, and we're really pleased to see the housing included for very low-income seniors, which is a tough thing to do on its own, and it's woven into this development really nicely. And we think that this creates a community and a neighborhood for the town that you're going to be very proud of in the end, with a mix of incomes and a mix of housing types and a lot of open space and a lot of amenities. I think a lot of people living throughout the county would love to see a development like this in their area. But before this application was even considered, the North 40 had its general plan designation changed. They had an EIR approved and certified. The zoning was established through the North 40 specific plan. And like I mentioned, this site's been identified through the different housing element cycles. And yet, unfortunately, as the judge ruled, there wasn't objective criteria that was used when the town denied the application. And I just wanted to say, it's this type of process that's resulting in all of these housing proposals that's working its way in Sacramento to the governor's desk. Many towns aren't using their local zoning process and planning process to come up with great projects. They're coming up with it to stop projects. And unfortunately, that's what it seems like has happened here. So we support this development. We'd like to see the town move forward with it. We think that it's an example of a good mixed use, mixed income development that other towns and cities can also take on for themselves. Thank you.
Thank you. Ken Arendt, and then afterwards Roy Moses.
Good evening, Mayor and town council members. My name is Ken Arendt. I'm going to start out by saying I am fully in favor of senior housing done responsibly. I'm fully in favor of the responsible growth in our town, to keep it our town. But I know that you're looking for, or at least many of you are looking for, some objective factors. So here we go. The development of housing, according to the EPA, cannot be done as it directly places that housing into existing health hazards. Recent publications from the New England Journal of Medicine cite the results of such studies as to demonstrate that housing at 1,000 feet or closer to freeways will place health into jeopardy. Dr. Marlin of Los Gatos, a physician specializing in the diseases of lungs and critical care medicine for over 25 years, a good Sam, wrote to you all regarding this information. You guys have that. I'm not going to read his whole thing, but he does cite that in June of this year, everything changed when the premier U.S. medical journal, the New England Journal of Medicine, published this article of almost 61 million adults sampled showing that living near a freeway or being exposed to ozone and small particulates, et cetera, includes a significant increase in death rates. Additionally, doing some more research on this, found an article just recently published by an attorney, land use attorney, Bill Adams in San Diego, regarding the land use and urban renewal, and this thing is published, is called What is a Safe Distance to Live and Work Near High Auto Emission Roads? And again, I have copies I can give to you. But he talks about ground zero, which is right on top of the automobiles, high toxicity zones, 300 feet, elevated toxicity zones, 1,000 feet. And he's, in this article, cites all kinds of articles that are in the courts. He indicates that in the 300 to 500 feet level, pregnant women who live within 500 feet of high traffic areas are prone to birth complications, including premature birth, low birth weight children, and children with medical problems. And the article goes on to talk about all of these things that have just come up to light. So I went a little bit further and I took a look at, well, what does the EPA say? And the EPA came out with something. I'll be happy to give you copies. It refers to everything you wanted to know about environmental regs, especially for small towns of 5,000 people and more. It says that in 1997, the President signed the executive order on the protection of children and aged from environmental health risks. And it went further in there to saying that compliance with EPCRA regulations can influence land use planning decisions, and that it provides stiff penalties for facilities that do not comply and allows citizens to file lawsuits against companies who do not comply.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll give this all to you if you want.
If you wouldn't mind handing it over to our clerk, and if you can include that in our public comment record. Thank you. Roy Moses, and then afterwards Jane Sonnenschein. And please, if I am mispronouncing your name, please correct me when you come forward.
Madam Mayor, Madam Mayor, council members, Roy Moses, 49-year resident of Los Gatos. I want to go on record stating that neither I nor anyone I know are against developers or anyone else who wishes to invest or improve the town of Los Gatos. But how, where, and why they are doing it is of major concern to me and many of the citizens of this town. As you know, we've been here before talking. An analogy of objectivity versus subjectivity. An objective view. In 2009, there was a concern that the Ken meteor was headed for a direct hit on Silicon Valley within the next 10 years. After much research, the government determined that the meteor was indeed coming, but it would miss us and land about 1,000 miles out in the Pacific Ocean. Therefore, the status quo was accepted. Everyone would survive, and the government passed a referendum stating these facts, and no further action was needed. Now, the related subjective view. Then in 2016, 7 years later, it was determined that the Ken meteor had a new trajectory, and that indeed it would have a direct hit on Silicon Valley in the next 3 years, and although thousands of lives would be affected by this event, that there was nothing the government could do because they had already decided in 2009 based on earlier studies that everything was okay, and they passed a referendum stating the facts, and that decision took precedence and could not be revisited, no matter how great the impact might be on the community. Now, as ridiculous as that might sound, this is exactly what has been happening in our area in our small town of Los Gatos over the last 8 to 10 years. We knew the onslaught was coming, but the government miscalculated using dated and inadequate facts, either consciously or unconsciously, to the detriment of the community. Too little, too early, too little, too late, you say? To do what is best for the town of Los Gatos? I say no way. We have a long way to go. I have too much confidence in the credibility and dedication of our town council and the planning commission to work with its citizens to continue to present to the many objective issues which can be orchestrated to make the North 40 project better for all parties concerned. If developers want to build in our town, then they have to shoulder the cost of the infrastructure which will be affected by the development. Read all the documents that are, the amount of money that they're willing to spend is pittance for what they're going to make on this project. Services tied to the senior housing, walking and biking pathways to traverse the whole town, and the money to build increased capacity in our schools. Money for improved roadways for egress and ingress to and from and in and around the North 40 has to be coordinated and incorporated into the infrastructure of the entire 40 acres. Town council must stop allowing the town staff from interfacing with developers, being behind closed doors without citizen participation in the process, allowing passage of legislation which is detrimental to the future of the town. This is the duty of the town council, to make us whole again, and our right to expect from you, being our elected officials. We will be with you every step of the way in this endeavor. Please find all the any other objective criteria that we could work with you on to deny this.
Miss Jane Sonnenschein, and afterwards Rod Teague.
Good evening. I'm opposed to the project, and for reasons of the traffic problem. I live on the West Los Gatos neighborhood. We're in that funny corner, and then we're very dependent on Lark Avenue in order to accommodate our medical needs and to be able to visit the scores and get on Highway 85, get on Highway 17. What's going to happen if this project continues the way it's currently designed is that we're going to start utilizing Winchester all the way down into North Santa Cruz Avenue. You're going to need to widen that road. It's clear that the 25-mile-an-hour speed limit that was implemented by Monte Sereno will be an issue when you have 4 lanes in both, 2 lanes in each direction. We're also going to have to avoid Lark Avenue and use Blossom Hill Road. So there's going to be additional traffic. It's a domino effect. There are a lot of residents on the west side of Los Gatos, and you also have to consider that my neighbors are Monte Sereno and Saratoga. And so we do depend on Lark Avenue, and currently Winchester and Lark Avenue is already backed up. So no one is ever from my neighborhood going to even get across Lark to visit the businesses or to use the freeway system. Most importantly, though, are the emergency vehicles. So, you know, it needs to be looked at, and it's certainly, you can't approve it on the current traffic study that was done in 2012. Thank you.
Rod Teague, and then Tony Alarcon.
Rod Teague, Johnson Avenue. Thank you for your time. So in my history, which has been a long time in Los Gatos, I don't think I've ever experienced anything so contentious, not only with the community, with our leadership, and I just want to say, you know, upon the court decision, I hope we can move forward cohesively. I think we have strong objective reasoning, and I'm going to be optimistic that the judge will concur. I do agree with all the nonprofits here and all the developer constituency. We do need some affordable housing. So this isn't about NIMBYism. This is about a specific plan that calls for a certain number of housing, and we're going to provide that. That's going to happen. So don't think that the community's standing up against housing. We want it. We were sold one thing. I went to meeting after meeting and listened to how this housing was going to be for millennial young professionals. It was going to be attainable. In reality, this housing is probably going to be about $1,000 a square foot. We're talking units, family units, that are going to be in excess of $2 million. So if you're a millennial, you're right out of college, you're working for Tesla, you know, I hope you have about $1 million to put down on a property. So let's get the type of housing we originally talked about, and let's make it happen. What I'm really up here to ask for is that we get a plan B And I'm asking for council to suspend any applications on the commercial part of this. 75% of the traffic is going to be generated from the commercial part of this. And we need to heavily reduce the square footage that's allowed, just so that we have some leverage. Doesn't mean we can't add it back, but if we continue on this pattern where on the south half, we stuffed as much housing as we could in, or we allowed the developers to stuff as much housing in their bag as they could, whoever comes in for the commercial half of this, whether it's Grosvenor or whomever, they're going to try to do the same thing, and it's going to be a disaster. And for all you that are here on behalf of the developer, I invite you to come here during commute hour. I invite you to come here during the weekend and see what residents really put up with. So it's my hope that we could all work together cohesively in the future, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Tony Alarcon, and then Diane Fisher.
Tony Alarcon, 229 Johnson Avenue. I'm going to read some of my statements, but I have some statements from another party that I'd like to get on record. Fact, and I'd like to quote Mr. Faber, the developer financed the specific plan. If that's not a fox in the hen house, I don't know what is. Fact, from my wife, she said this weekend, if I was to buy a house here in Los Gatos now, I would not do it because traffic is unacceptable. Fact, 40 minutes from Johnson Avenue to the corner of Blossom Hill in North Santa Cruz, 40 minutes to go get dry cleaning and come home on a Saturday. The specific plan was not intended to serve the developer, it was intended to serve our constituents. Fact, everybody supports the senior housing, which I do, but let's get real. 49 units represents 0.0016% of our population. We should be delivering more senior affordable housing and more market rate housing with smaller units for seniors and put a 55 overlay on it, like the terraces, which serves 260 residents on 7 acres. Excuse me, this is a little passionate for me. I've lived here since 1991, and if this does not improve when my children graduate from high school, I will be leaving Los Gatos. I regret not running for town council last election. I wish I would have done so. I very much appreciate the 40 hours a week you town council members put in plus, and I just want to say thank you for doing that in your service. Now, I would like to go back to Chapter 2.6, which was referenced earlier from another speaker, Section H. The removal of regulatory barriers to promote infill housing does not preclude a city from finding that an individual infill project would be adversely impacted by the surrounding environment or transportation patterns. Therefore, recommending that council makes the following findings: that in compliance general plan policy TRA-1 spot 1, development shall not exceed transportation capacity, initiates a hiatus on all development initiatives until a date to be determined, that the level of traffic currently is overcapacity due to the now routine rerouting of regional traffic due to inability of state-controlled highways 9, 17, and 85. Objective evidence, real-time reports extracted from Nextdoor, Town Not City, and the letter from Matt Morley, Director to Google Waze. Quantifiable data can be provided in analysis of traffic counts and data collected from the Public Safety Department. We recommend that the council makes the following findings: that as required by the Housing Accountability Act, paragraph E,
Thank you, Mr. Alarcon. I am going to have to cut you off, but since that is written, would you like to submit that for the record, and then we can review it as we continue to look at written comments? Thank you. Diane Fisher.
Good evening. I'm Diane Fisher, Director of the Jewish Community Relations Council here in Los Gatos, located at the JCC on Oka Road. our organization works to help resolve conflicts in our community, and I feel like this is an important one to speak up on. This housing issue clearly has been passionately debated, and in Jewish tradition, debate is highly exercised and valued, but we also teach that one must not be unyielding in a dispute. The judge ruled that the town was wrong to reject this proposal. The housing crisis has only gotten worse in the last year. As a community organization co-located with the project, we see a great benefit in providing housing for seniors and young adults. It will not only benefit that demographic, it'll benefit all of us who wish to live in a multi-generational community. The Jewish community is ready to be part of the healing, part of the solution. We look forward to the traffic improvements, the community gardens, the donations to our schools, and the bike lanes. The people residing in this development will become community volunteers. They'll enrich our community. I urge you to move forward with this project.
Thank you, Ms. Fisher. John Eichinger? Thank you. And afterwards, it'll be James McLeod.
John Eichinger, 45-year resident of Los Gatos. Thank you for all your service. Objective. I heard all the comments from folks here who want affordable housing and think it's very important.
Excuse me, Mr. Eichinger, if you could address us.
Okay.
And
hear
you
all
need
the
to be
comments of
speaking in the microphone. Thank you.
I hear all the comments of the people who think we should have affordable housing, and I fully agree with that. This is not going to be affordable housing. Again, $900,000 purchase price. I addressed this in a letter to the town council on August 10th. $900,000 purchase price means that you're going to need a salary of $142,000 a year. That's not our town workers. That's on the low end of the costs of this development. The high end is a $1.5 million purchase price, which means that you're going to need a salary of $222,000 a year in order to afford a mortgage and down payment to buy that house. That's with a down payment of $300,000. So again, I believe that there's an objective reasoning for denying this project the way it is. It's not affordable. And one last comment, a traffic study that was done on a Tuesday afternoon, off-peak season. I know that it was already accepted, you can't do anything about it, but that's not what we're living with today. Thank you. Please deny this application as it stands.
Thank you. Next speaker, James McLeod, and afterwards will be Professor Diane Dreher.
Evening. James McLeod. I live in the North 40, and I haven't been living there very long. I got a very good deal, and everybody's been very nice to me there. I always wanted to live in a walnut orchard, and now I do. And I sit out there and drink my coffee, and I look at the trees, and I don't hear anybody talking about the trees. So there's 4 kinds of trees out there on that property. There's old trees, young trees, dwarf trees, different kinds of trees. And one thing that's nice about these trees is they're very clean. And I guess they're all going to get sent through the chipper. But I see a very good opportunity, a tremendous opportunity for Los Gatos. If I understand, Los Gatos was known as the city of fruits and nuts. So I can't do anything about the fruits, but we can keep the nuts. My idea is that the city, with its crews, can move the small trees to their parks and streets. These trees are worth a lot of money. If the developers could work with the city, you know, this is kind of like a prearranged marriage by law here. The development and Los Gatos is going to have to get together. And acrimony and bad feelings and all these kinds of things are going to have to end, and they're going to have to talk nicely. And one way we could do that is by sharing the trees. the developers could stand back. They know which trees they're going to keep and which ones they're not. And the ones that can be moved to the parks, I say we move them to the parks. If there's too many trees for the parks, people can donate money and put their name on a tree and have it moved to a city street or to their lot or whatever, but they shouldn't be thrown into a chipper. Every day I see them, they're producing beautiful walnuts out there. And I hear that the bottom part of the 40 is going to be stay in walnut, so that's going to be very nice. And the city can just be known for their walnuts. There's another type of tree in there, though, that is old and woody, and I think that the artisans of Los Gatos could benefit greatly by these trees. Somebody could slab them up, whatever, and all the artisans can put in, and beautiful stuff can be made out of this walnut wood, and you have a lot of artisans here in this city. So there's a lot of things we can do, and I think we can do it at a very low cost. I think there's something like 2,000 trees out there. And I think a tree is worth something like $1,000. So there's a lot of opportunities.
Yes.
Sorry, I can't finish the rest. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Diane Dreher. And then afterwards, Lucille Weidman.
Diane Dreher, Arroyo Grande Way. Good evening. The preamble to our town's smoking ordinance states, the California Air Resources Board has placed secondhand smoke in the same category as the most toxic automobile air pollutants by categorizing it as a toxic air contaminant for which there is no safe level of exposure. This council, and thanks to this council, responded to the Air Resources Board in both 2016 and 2017 with a great smoking ordinance that protects the people in this town from the dangers of secondhand smoke. I'm here tonight to talk about another deadly form of air pollution, especially in the light of Dr. Marlin's letter, which is in your packet, and which addresses the newest objective data about serious risk of premature death to people living near freeways. Data from a June 2017 Harvard University study of 61 million Americans, published in the New England Journal of Medicine. Freeway health dangers are not new. State air quality regulators have been warning since 2005 about not building new homes closer than 500 feet to freeways. What has changed is the increasing recognition and scientific documentation of such dangers. As you heard tonight from our town attorney, the judges stated that for the council to deny this application, you have to identify specific public health and safety impacts that can only be addressed by denying the application. The science here is objective. Air pollution health concerns of living near a freeway can be traced back to well before 2005, the year California prohibited building new public schools within 500 feet of a freeway. Now, the latest research, with its high-resolution data, shows that there is no threshold level below which the threat from ozone or particulate drops off. As with secondhand cigarette smoke and other Class A carcinogens, less is always better. The Southern California Air Resources Board has been recommending a 1,000-foot setback for all new housing for over 10 years. Please, don't make people choose between having a house or having their health. Tonight, I call upon the town council to act with moral and legal responsibility to protect our citizens from freeway pollution, health risks, as you have already done with the risk from secondhand smoke. This decision would make our town citizens proud and create a healthier future for Los Gatos. Thank you.
Thank you. David Weissman. And then afterwards, Brent Ventura.
Dave Weissman. I will speak directly to the judge's requirement that to deny, objective health reasons need to be presented. Unfortunately, the air quality health aspects of this project were not properly analyzed in the 2013 consultant document. Los Gatos is in compliance with all but 2 EPA car and truck associated pollutants. Unfortunately, both ozone and small particulates are linked with increased rates of cancer, respiratory disease, premature births, heart attacks, decreased life expectancy, etc. To gauge the amount of airborne small particulates on the North 40, the consultant used data from a station located in a 100% residential area of Cupertino, 7.8 miles from the North 40, and more than 1 mile from any freeway. Why is this important? Because cars and trucks on freeways are the major source of such pollutants. The consultant then took these already suspect numbers and plugged them into a model to generate information for the North 40. There was no on-set monitoring done as far as I can tell. The report concluded that cancer risks are greatest closest to Highway 17 and decrease with distance from the highway. That conclusion is not surprising since state planners have been saying for years that all new houses should be located more than 500 feet and ideally 1,000 feet from any freeway. But what I can't find anywhere in that report are numbers on other health effects, since for every 1 death that will occur in the North 40 from polluted air, the Marion Institute estimates there will be almost 3,200 adverse health effects. I guess it's a good thing that the North 40 is located close to Good Samaritan Hospital. So, what to do? Perhaps under conditions of approval. First off, a subsequent EIR, as opposed to a supplemental EIR, should be required since council needs an adequate air quality study to make informed decisions. Actual on-site monitoring, especially on a summer weekend beach day, should be part of the study. Even the consultant's report says, and I quote, "The site layout shall locate sensitive receptors," which is the report's euphemism for children under 14, the elderly over 65, and people with cardiovascular and chronic respiratory diseases, end quote, as far from possible from the Highway 17 traffic lanes. Second, to save the town from legal liability, notify potential North 40 homebuyers that under California Proposition 65, they will be exposed to at least 6 state-certified cancer-causing agents. People should not have to choose between having a house to live in versus their health. Thank you.
Thank you. Lucille Weidman.
Good evening. Good evening. Lucille Weidman, 215 Car Lister Drive, Los Gatos. After reading many of the emails addressed to town council and staff, and after listening to all the previous speakers' concerns regarding health and safety, transportation, and traffic issues, among others, I think that it is important to reflect and think about what the judge said in his decision. The judge said that if the local agency purposes to disapprove the project or to approve it upon the conditions that the project be developed at a lower density, the local agency shall base its decision regarding the proposed housing development project upon written findings supported by substantial evidence on the record that both of the following conditions exist. The project would have a specific adverse impact upon the public health and safety unless the project is disapproved or approved upon the condition that the project be developed at a lower density. Specific adverse impact means a significant, quantifiable, direct, and unavoidable impact based on objective, identified written public health and safety standards, policies, or conditions as they existed on the date the application was deemed complete. 2, there is no feasible method to satisfactorily mitigate or avoid the adverse impact identified pursuant to paragraph 1 other than the disapproval of the housing development project or the approval of the project upon the conditions that it be developed at a lower density. Feasibility is defined as capable of being accomplished in a successful manner within a reasonable period of time, taking into account economic, environmental, social, and technological factors. Is there any doubt that the information presented here tonight meets the bar that the judge has set? This project, as proposed, should be once again denied. Should the applicants wish to return to the table and re-engage with the citizens of this town to design a new project, I, for one, will be happy to talk with them. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I call Mr. Ventura, quick question. Are we technical issues resolved? Okay, so I'm sorry, but I am going to have to call a 5-minute break until we get technical issues resolved so that we can make sure that Council Member Rennie is able to listen to further testimony, okay? If I can call everyone back, please.
I can't do that. My act is pretty good the way it is, actually.
Okay, if we can call everyone back into chamber, including our next speaker. Okay. So thank you for the quick break. I apologize for that technical difficulty. We'll continue with our public testimony. Our next speaker was Mr. Brent Ventura. Thank you.
Good evening, Council. My name is Brett Ventura. I'm a lifelong resident of the town, and also I'm here as the attorney representing the owners of a very small parcel in Phase 2 of this project. We support the council's decision to deny the project on the grounds that this application represents some poor planning and imposes impacts on the entire town that are not satisfactorily mitigated and are not necessary. We don't have to accept these impacts. The issue here is this application seizes all of the housing, or virtually all of the housing allocated for the entire 44 acres. There's no mandate or requirement in the specific plan that all of the housing, or 90% of it, be built in Phase 1. And by putting all of the housing in Phase 1, instead of spreading it proportionally throughout the entire 44 acres, it causes three impacts that I think the council should consider, and I think are solid grounds for would support a denial of this application. One of those impacts is on Los Gatos schools. While the developers and the school district have reached an agreement, it doesn't mean that the impacts on the schools are necessarily mitigated. And I would point out, I think the voters of the community don't see it that way, as for the first time we rejected a school bond measure. The second issue is here, by putting all the housing right there on the Lark Avenue, Los Gatos Boulevard corner, we're impacting peak traffic flows in that area, especially in the morning. And you're going to have a conflict with the most highly used access to Highway 17, the Lark Avenue ramps, with all the people trying to go and get to school in the Phase 1 of the North 40 housing. And finally, Phase 2, with all of the housing used up, there are only 30 units, or 33 units, I believe, of market rate housing that can be built on the remaining 22 acres in Phase 2. During the last public hearings, the number 66 was thrown around. That's not accurate. I've spoken to staff, and they have confirmed 33 units is all that's left. No medical offices are allowed on Phase 2. So the only viable type of development you're going to see there is commercial. And with Amazon and internet commercial sales seeming to dominate, what you're going to have, the only type of successful retail we see now is a Santana Row type project. So we'll build a Santana Row on the North 40, which directly competes with our downtown, and I don't see how it serves the town interests. So for those reasons, I ask you to deny this application.
Thank you, Mr. Ventura. Next speaker, Andy Wu.
One moment to adjust. Thank you. Good evening, members of the council. I was listening outside. I don't mean this in any derogatory manner, but it feels like Groundhog Day to me. I never saw the movie, but I remember these same arguments being put before this council the last time we were around. You know, it's an axiomatic rule of war that it's better to show up with 100 ready to fight and on time than with 1,000 at the wrong spot and late. We have before us the plan. It is the plan on the board. It has been in the making for at least the last 6 or 7 years, and the history of this North 40 development goes back 2 decades. The last time I was here, I encouraged this council to move forward. The council decided not to move forward. We are where we are. Now, that said, let me just point out that Several years ago, the citizenry of this town, by citizenry I mean 75% roughly of the town, voted to approve the Netflix campus expansion. In doing so, we created or exacerbated the housing shortage crisis. And yet, nobody here, at least the majority of the people here, don't want to own up to that. They don't want new housing stock to be created in this town. And as you know, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Colin Powell, said to 43, you break it, you own it. We broke it, we own it, but nobody wants to own this. Now let me just quote something that I recently read in a copy of Forbes magazine. And the quote is, part of what leaders must do is to make it psychologically safe to be able to raise important questions. And leaders must make sure that we understand how to convince those who we work with and who work with us that we don't not only want to hear the unvarnished truth, but we want to hear the unvarnished truth. And we do that by making it not about who's right, but about what is right. And that's a quote from Sully Sullenberger, Captain Sully Sullenberger of the Miracle on the Hudson fame. And he was quoted as saying, this is a principle of leadership. What I don't see is anybody willing to own up to that leadership, because this is a hard decision. It's divided the town. And we've been here debating this issue for years. And let me just finish by saying, this council knows it's limited as to what it can do by the court decision. You can't redo the EIR, you can't redo the traffic studies, as many of the previous speakers have said. And you have competent counsel to advise you. Listen to your counsel.
Thank you. Peter Curtis.
Hi, my name's Peter Curtis. I've been a citizen of Los Gatos for about 11 years, and I am reading a letter written by Tom Timo, who's been very involved in these proceedings. He's out of town. He asked me to read it in. For the record, I do concur with much of what he says. Thank you all for the amazing work you're doing to keep Los Gatos a town, not a city. I apologize that I am missing this meeting as I have to be in Washington, D.C. for business. This letter that my friend and longtime resident Peter Curtis is reading on my behalf outlines the core of the issue, which as I see it is that our council is playing checkers while the developers are playing chess. I applaud all of you for piling up as many objective reasons as possible to deny this application. Time is money, and we must continue to extend the game by sending this back to the courts via another denial. In real honesty, this is the only way to extract the most we can in a negotiation and get this project to look like Los Gatos, not Santana Row. As a proud business exec that believes all negotiations are a game of chess, it saddens me to see how we as a town have been so outmaneuvered when it comes to the North 40. While we may be down a piece or two in this chess match, we are far from out of it if this council, including those who voted for the application, start to think a move or two ahead. First, you must again deny the application on objective grounds, as thin as you believe they might be, and send this back to the courts. There are legitimate reasons, and many of them will or have been cited already tonight, that pertain to public safety outside the scope of the EIR, specifics about the senior housing, or other aspects of the application. Put as many of them as possible into your denial and make Grosvenor go back to the courts and ultimately the negotiating table. Concurrent with this exercise, place a temporary moratorium on any applications for the northern/commercial half while instructing the Planning Commission to modify the specific plan to reduce the square footage allowed. Furthermore, if there is any additional bureaucratic red tape you can throw at the actual building phase, add them now. Anyone that has done a remodel of their homes knows this is possible. This will significantly reduce the profits the owners and developers will receive and provides you something to trade for a better application in the southern residential half. What defines better? Well, if we had it to do over again, wouldn't we have placed another Blossom Manor, Nob Hill shopping, or some affordable senior and millennial housing, as well as a community center that all looks and feels like Los Gatos, not Santana Row? While an application like this means virtually tearing up the specific plan, we could get close to this result within its current constraints, or more correctly stated, using the same holes that the current application used. Ironically, a better plan like this will still create large profits for the Yukis and the developers. If the town would offer, I, Tom Timo, am happy to carve away time from my business pro bono to help hammer out a deal. If you're not inclined to have an outsider negotiate, I suggest you ask Marcia Jensen to lead the effort. Thank you.
Thank you. Markeen Smith.
I've got stuff to put on the screen. Oh. Great. Okay. Oh, it's okay. Are you ready? Oh, good. Okay. Hi, I'm Markeen Smith. I live on Drakes Bay Avenue. I've lived here almost 30 years. I wanted to show that we are in the Vesona Light Rail district, and this plan, the current application before us, conflicts with the Vesona Light Rail, the Los Gatos Vesona Light Rail element, and neither does it comply with our transportation element, and it doesn't comply with the specific plan. And this is the development. As you can see, it's completely, let's see, let me get my bearings. Here's 17, here's the North 40. And here's the Swim and Market Club and Oka Road. Netflix is over here. The VTA light rail is like several miles up this way. It is not near transit. It is not transit accessible. It is not practically accessible through transit. The 49 bus gets on 85 before it goes there, and that goes all the way up to Camden Avenue. It takes about 48 minutes to get to the light rail station. And so I have... I think we have to base make the conditions of approval very, very explicit, because obviously the developers are going to make them as they're using their own subjective standards to make them as good for them as possible. And the biggest thing, I'm going to read off some of my proposed conditions for approval. My first thing is that we all have to recognize that it is in an agricultural land, and so it's never been developed before. This is urban, this is a really suburban sprawl here, and so the fact that the developer would expect to put this development apart from any other part of Los Gatos and not contribute to infrastructure when it's going to require more infrastructure than any infill development or any development downtown or in any other part here. It's going to require, he's promoting it as going with light rail, and it doesn't. We ride light rail in town, and we have to drive there, and anybody there is going to have to drive there. It's going to put the 1,000 people who will live here will be surrounded by freeways with no way to get to light rail except by driving. So can I propose a couple of things? I was going to propose that the developer help fund the VTA light rail extension as is required by our VTA light rail plan in the town of Los Gatos. And so the plans are EIR is certified. The distance from the Winchester station to the Vesona station is just 1.75 miles. It's going to cost about $175 million.
So, Ms. Smith, conditions of approval that it sounds like you said
yes.
Plural. If you can submit those,
okay,
so that we can look at them during the week.
Oh, that'd be great.
That would be wonderful.
And then I can't
Sorry,
now
but
because
I am
unfortunately
going to have to cut you off.
I left them at home, so I'll submit them over the email.
Yes, and if you can submit them to Mr. Paulson, he'll make sure they're part of the record and that all of us will have a copy.
Okay, will do. Thank you.
Edward Morimoto.
Good evening. My name is Ed Morimoto. I live at 460 Monterey Avenue, and I'm a member of the Yuki family. I've been thinking about how I would try to explain tonight's hearing to my grandparents if they were still alive. Having passed away before I was born, I don't really know how my grandfather would react to 8 years of study, debate, and I think it's fair to say conflict over the North 40. I think I have a better idea of Grandma's reaction. She actually participated in the selection of Grosvenor prior to passing away the very same month that selection was formalized. It's not a stretch to believe they might be frustrated by that the fate of their home they bought 72 years ago to raise my mother and her 2 older siblings is still in limbo. They might think the decision is obvious and that the opposition is baseless. They would probably find the complexity of this decision dizzying. And how could it be that their family's continual efforts to be good stewards of the North 40, good neighbors to Los Gatos, and the sacrifices that entailed should be rewarded with chess moves and red tape obstructionism? Actually, I have that same conversation with a lot of my living relatives, family members who grew up in this town, went to school here, and perhaps still call Los Gatos their home today. Of course, while the fate of the North 40 may impact us more directly than others, we understand that the importance to the town of getting this right. We have to remind ourselves that the decision is anything but simple, nor is it black or white. Each of us views the issue in our own incomplete and imperfect way, sometimes limited by our capacity to take in an overwhelming amount of information, or skewed by a natural tendency to focus on that which affirms one's own beliefs and discount with that which does not. But perhaps most importantly, the outcome for the North 40 will have to be a compromise, and that's just really hard. How do we weigh height impacts on views against addressing a housing shortage, or improving the town's tax base against concerns on traffic? We can't even agree on whether the drivers to and from the North 40 will create a traffic nightmare, or will the traffic infrastructure improvements improve flow? When those trade-offs are subject to differing viewpoints, and perhaps the benefits and costs impact different parties, the process in which we have engaged is our path to resolution. Sometimes we invoke the authorities such as traffic engineers and their calculations. Sometimes we seek the opinions of those most acutely impacted by the trade-offs, such as the school district, who both will receive additional funding and students, while bearing a responsibility to maintain the quality of education. It's a long debate-filled path, and admittedly far from perfect, but in the end, I believe it has resulted in a product superior to its start. So on behalf of my family, I thank the council, staff, and all the bodies and individuals who have invested in this difficult decision over the years. We believe that tortuous path has resulted in a good compromise for all parties, and that continued efforts to further scrutinize or challenge it offer diminishing returns to all. So that, with that, we respectfully ask the council to approve the development application under consideration tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. I have one more speaker card. Should anyone else like to speak, I urge you to submit your card now. Jack Veneta.
Good evening, Council. Jack Veneta, Euclid Avenue, Los Gatos. Very few residents understand the financial bind that this town is in, and that bind could become much worse if you did decide to pursue another risky lawsuit. I ask the council here and those watching the TV to understand that in 2002, we had 0 pension debt. In 15 short years, that has escalated to $53 million, not counting the past 2 years of poor investment returns by CalPERS. If we add those 2 years, we actually owe $69 million. And with CalPERS finally admitting that the projections were too high, we'll also owe another $3 million over the next 4 years, for a total of $72 million. We all tend to think that it is someone else's problem, or we think that CalPERS or the state will bend and solve the debt problem. But this $72 million is our problem to solve. Several cities have already tried to file bankruptcy only to see that fail. They still owe their full debt. The loss to lawsuit may cost us about $700,000. Continue the lawsuits and we'll owe substantially more. Add that to the $72 million that we already owe. By developing the North 40, the town will receive annual tax payments from the developers of the property every year. I've seen $3 million in tax revenue increases mentioned, but unfortunately the town has no idea of how much revenue will be generated by this project. As unfortunate as the development may seem to some people, it will help to reduce the burden that we taxpayers have to pay. And if the people want to cut Phase 2 of the North 40 in half, then they need to be forthright and tell everyone that the tax revenues not collected from the developer will be collected from us. We're in a financial quagmire, and there's a lot of hand-wringing going on, but most of you won't read it in the newspaper. It's not that the information isn't there, nor is it hidden that well in the town's financial statements. It's easier to avoid the subject and think that someone besides ourselves will solve this. The North 40 development taxes can be a part of the solution, but they are certainly not the whole solution to the pension debt. Once again, think about it. In 15 years, we've grown to $72 million in debt, and we have minimal solutions as to how to fix that, and yet the debt continues to climb. Somehow, some way, we residents of Los Gatos will be paying this debt down, but right now it's growing like a wildfire in the hot summer wind. The council needs to keep this escalating debt in mind when they think about adding to our costs with a high-risk lawsuit on August 1st. The financial numbers that I've used in this speech are verifiable within the town's own financial statements. Thank you.
Thank you. Woody Needham?
Good evening, members of the council. My name is Woody Needham, and I live on Azalea Way in Los Gatos. I just wanted to make a couple of comments about the decision that the judge rendered. And on page 6, it talks about how the petitioners argued forcefully that the town is trying to create barriers to housing development. The town did not do that. The town, 320 housing units is a done deal. That's going to happen. The other question is, how is it going to happen? And I think the judge made some mistakes in his finding on this. Number one, are the findings supported by substantial evidence? The issue of whether the housing should be spread over the entire North 40 was something that the town wanted, and that's one of the reasons why they denied the application. The judge said there's no specific allocation requirement in the specific plan, so it's a discretionary determination of a subjective policy. I don't know how much more specific the town could be than to say in the specific plan we envision housing over the entire North 40. The town didn't say we want you to put X number of units in the northern section because the town wanted to give the developer some discretion. But over 8 years of discussing this, it was clear that the housing should be developed over the entire area. The second thing is the Gen Xers, the point about the size of the units. That is on page 11 of the court's decision. The Appendix C of the specific plan talks about the exact requirements that the town anticipates in terms of the size of these units. Yet the developer presents a plan which is entirely different, just because that's what he wanted to do. His little feedback groups supported larger units, so that's what he presented. The town found that the court found that the town's conclusion was right, that the developer's plan did not support did not support the specific plan. The specific plan required something else, but it said this was a subjective whatever. Here again, I don't know how the town could have been clearer. Essentially what the developer did is sit here through 8 years, heard all the testimony, all the arguments, and then just did what he wanted. And it seems to me that the town is on solid footing in saying these are objective standards, and you should be able to do the legislative history, that is the discussion of the groups outside of the public meetings as well, to determine that.
Thank you, Mr. Needham.
Thank you.
Okay, so I have no cards remaining. And I don't see anyone rushing forward. So before I close the public testimony, the verbal part, I want to make sure that those in chambers who would like to speak tonight has had that opportunity. Because once I close the verbal testimony tonight and we begin discussions and deliberations, we will no longer take verbal testimony, and all comments that need to be submitted will be in writing. Okay? Okay, so with that clarification, I will close verbal testimony.
You have the...
Oh, I'm so sorry, Mr. Faber. You didn't speak up.
Actually, Andrew Faber again. I don't have much to say because we do intend to respond to some of these matters in writing. I did have the feeling of somewhat deja vu all over again listening to this hearing because most all of the issues have been brought up before and have been dealt with and are already in the record. And as necessary, I think the staff will acquaint you with that, and we will refer to it as we need to. A new matter was the allegation that we're playing chess with the town and that the town should throw bureaucratic red tape at us. That's surprising. We're not playing chess with the town. We're trying to work with the town under the aegis of the court order that we now have to make sure that the town makes the right decision at this point. And so we will be back to you in writing, and we appreciate the hearing tonight and look forward to working with you on an approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Faber, and I'm sorry I forgot about your 5 minutes. Okay, Vice Mayor, do you have a question of Mr. Faber? Yes, I would like that. So if you could please return.
That's what I get for standing up here, right?
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Faber. So my question is, maybe this is a little bit long, but the question is, back in the September 1st council meeting, the applicant, your applicants provided exhibits B through G of potential changes that would be acceptable if during a conditional approval. And you said those were basically generated in a response to a motion I made in the council meeting before, and Council Member Sayok's concerns about asking for changes that had not been seen. So my question for you is whether those exhibits are still in play, and let me just read the titles, of each exhibit, so you remember they were in attachment 32 from the September 1st council meeting. And Exhibit B was architecture elevations along Los Gatos Boulevard. There was 2 buildings there. I think it was 24 and 25. Exhibit C was more traditional elevations along Lark. Exhibit D was row house elevations to replace or supplement existing row house elevation A. Exhibit E was at-grade floor plan condo clusters resulting in 10 at-grade one-bedroom flats that would be 1,000 square feet that would be more senior-friendly. Exhibit F was market hall architectural enhancements options. Exhibit G was modifying the trees of the sound walls to preserve views of hills down the streets to the west. It had evergreens being switched to potentially a Brisbane box or buckthorn trees at the terminuses of R2 for 1st and 3rd Street. Did you understand all that?
Yes, I did. Okay, and the answer, Councilmember Rennie, through the chair, is that the applicants delivered a letter to the town council on January 21st, last Friday, addressing that issue. The letter contained a PowerPoint summarizing benefits of the project and also contained a response to that question, because the earlier letter, as you say, had mentioned B, C, D, E, F, and G, which were keyed to various items that had been raised at the council meeting, primarily by Councilmember Rennie. In the letter, we said that we would agree to those items. We left out items C and D, and we left those out because those were architectural changes, and our impression at the time was that there was disagreement on the council about those architectural changes. We had suggested in the original letter we would agree to all of those exhibit changes. In the letter of last Friday, as I said, we again affirmed that. We left out C and D because we believe the council appeared not to be unanimous on that issue. If in fact the council wanted us to make changes of C and D, we could do that as well. The concern that we had also, which is addressed in the letter, is that it is not our intent to reopen the project in the sense of proposing new things, because we don't want to create a hornet's nest. We don't want to have decisions that then get appealed and then somebody files a referendum or tries to do, in some way tries to challenge ministerial approvals. At the time, we had said that we would agree to those changes to be effective ministerially. In the letter on Friday, we suggested that the way to do that actually would be to change condition of approval number 1. There are 209, I think, conditions of approval, and this would be, or 211, something like that. This would be number 1, and the change in number 1 would be that the council would be approving those exhibits so that all further action would be ministerial in terms of implementing them. So you asked a long question. That's my long answer. The short answer is that basically, yes, we're still in agreement, as we had said we would do a year ago.
All right, thank you.
So, Mr. Faber, just to be nitpicky, I want to clarify, you meant the June 21 letter that you submitted versus January 21.
No, I meant
July.
July.
Oh, see, thank you.
Did I say April again?
I'm glad everyone's paying attention. So July 21, the Friday letter that was submitted.
That is the one I meant, yes.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not sure if that's what I said, but certainly what I meant. Okay.
Okay. Any further questions since we have Mr. Faber here? Okay, thank you. Okay, I will now close verbal testimony for this hearing. Before we ask any questions, I do want to make sure we do disclosures. So why don't we start with Councilmember Leonardis?
Thank you, Mayor Sayoc. I had a conversation with representatives from the developer over the telephone, as well as many citizen advocates.
Councilmember Johnson?
Read all the correspondence we received. I met with everyone that asked me. That just happened to be the developer, so I met with him.
Okay. I had a meeting with the applicant team, as well as, actually with all members of the applicant team that are listed, as well as members of the public, as well as the manyest people who have had various opinions since we've been in court for the past year. Councilmember Johnson? Spector?
You're gone a month and you forget my name. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I met with the representatives of the developer and one resident. Thank you.
And I've had many conversations with residents, and since I've been traveling, I've had 2 phone calls with the applicants.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Council members, any questions of staff at this time? Okay. Vice Mayor, do you have any questions of staff?
I would have a request that staff re-put in exhibits B through G for the next council meeting so that they can be reviewed to decide if they are things we'd like to consider.
Okay. So then I actually have some questions of staff. Okay, the first, before I begin, I want to thank all the public comments that we heard today, not only verbally as well as those that have been written. And so what I want to be able to do with my questions to our legal counsel is to sift through what our information that we may use moving forward. The first I wanted to clarify is with regards to traffic. And we are all experiencing the traffic difficulties that all the various mapping technologies is putting onto our roads. Can you please remind me the criteria that the judge issued about significant public health? Is there a time frame from which we have to justify that from when that problem occurs? My understanding it's when date of completion of the application. But in your slide, there was no specific mention of that date. So
No, it
if you
wasn't
could
because it
clarify.
summarized it. So I would pull up the exact decision, and the exact decision is actually a quote. It isn't from the judge making that language up. It's a direct language from the Housing Accountability Act. And so we can certainly bring that back, that exact language from the decision as to the health and safety standards. I believe you'll find that on page. No, it's not actually on page 13. I thought it was. So we can come back with that exact language that says the date of the application is deemed complete is what it does state, but I want to get the exact language.
Okay, if you
So
can
that's
include the
more-
exact language of the court decision and what that date is,
Mhm.
that would be quite helpful. The next question I actually had with regard, the congestion, chapter 2.6 was referred to, congestion management in the Housing Accountability Act. Could you bring back that full language so that we can all read what exactly it requires? Yes. Yes, Councilmember
Can I
Johnson?
just follow up on that? When Ms. Dorner put her slide up, it looked like it was Government Code 65088, and it was Chapter 2.6 of 65088, and I'm just want to make sure that we get the right site.
Okay.
The next topic question that I have, scientific studies have come forward. The one that was cited during public testimony was a recent article in the New England Journal of Medicine. Can you please, when coming forward, discuss what is the threshold of new scientific evidence given the Housing Accountability Act and whether or not that can be considered when looking at health hazards? And then I know that we discussed it. You discussed it in this staff report, but again, if you can include for the next, in our original denial, we had discussed the intent to spread out the housing units and the judge's decision that it was subjective. But there was an issue raised tonight about the financial burden for the northern property owners and the lack of uses that would remain for them. If you could address that in the next staff report as well. Okay. And council members, if you have no other questions, are there any requests for more information for our next meeting? Councilmember Leonardis?
Thank you, Mayor Sayoc. Looking at some information which was provided by Matthew Hudeas, I think he provided what appears to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pages of what is considered applicable objective standard or criterias. I'd like staff to respond to these items before our next meeting.
Councilmember Johnson?
I'm assuming that we're able to submit written requests between now and the next hearing.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. And Vice Mayor, I turn to you. Do you have any further requests of information of staff prior to the next hearing?
I'm looking at my notes from the meeting and I don't see anything right now. No.
Okay. And as Councilmember Johnson had asked, if there are further requests of any council members, please submit those to staff. As I mentioned earlier, even though verbal testimony has concluded, if there are further comments you would like to make, please submit those to Mr. Paulson. He will make sure it is part of our record and that your comments will be submitted to all council members. Our next scheduled public hearing on this matter will be August 1. Actually, I shouldn't assume that. I need a motion for us to continue this to August 1.
I'll maybe do it, but I actually have a question for Ms. Pavetti or Mr. Paulson. I don't remember our regularly scheduled events for August 1 that are business aside from the North 40, and I'm just wondering how much regular business do we have on that regular meeting, and are we going to have an issue with timing with the North 40 if we continue it to that date?
We have a substantial consent calendar for council consideration, considering our July recess, and then we have just a handful of items under other business, so I think we should have ample time for North 40 deliberations.
All right, so I'll make a motion to continue this to our regularly scheduled meeting on August 1st.
Second. Okay, I'll second the motion. So, any comments? All in favor of the continuance? Aye.
We need a roll call vote. Roll call vote
Oh,
needed.
that is correct. Okay, would you mind doing a roll call vote for us tonight?
Councilmember Steve Leonardis.
Here. Finally.
We need
That was
yes
yes.
or no. Yes. I understood that, but I need you to say it.
Councilmember Marcia Jensen.
Here and yes.
Councilmember Barbara Spector.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Rob Rennie.
Awake and yes.
And Mayor Mariko Sayak.
Yes. Okay, so it does pass unanimously, and this matter will be continued until August 1st. Before I conclude, are there any last-minute procedural issues that staff would like to make sure that we're aware of before the next continuance? No? Okay. Thank you again very much for your participation, and I hope to see many of you on August 1st. Thanks. Meeting is adjourned.